Perhaps one of the most significant environmental problems we face today is global climate change. If you look at the news media, there are several ways different interests frame this topic. The interesting thing about framings is that they don't have to be factually true. They just have to be something that people could believe to be true or valid. Generally speaking, there are two main camps we hear about in mainstream media on this topic. Those trying to solve the problem, and those we might call climate change skeptics or deniers. One side says that our climate is changing and humans are causing it. The skeptic side often claims that climate change isn't even happening, or perhaps that it is happening, but it's due to natural, not human, causes. Once we get past these most basic claims, we may see claims about how bad it will or won't be, with some saying it will cause a host of negative outcomes and others saying it's really not that big of a deal. And finally, we hear competing claims about what to do about climate change, with skeptics often claiming that proposed solutions aren't tenable. With all these different arguments abuzz, it can be a little overwhelming to sort out. So in today's video, I want to set the stage with this debate and assess where the reality actually falls on the topic of climate change. So let's consider what's really at stake here. While values are implicated in terms of the solutions, most of these claims point to evidentiary realities, and they are so contradictory that clearly they can't both be true. Let's start by looking at what climate change is. Global climate change, also known as global warming, refers to the gradual altering of the Earth's climate due to an increase in greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are compounds that absorb solar radiation entering the Earth's atmosphere and, as a consequence, warm the planet. This phenomenon is known as the greenhouse effect, as these gases act like the glass panels on a greenhouse, keeping the space warm. In fact, we've known about this phenomenon since the turn of the 19th century. Common greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, all of which occur naturally in our environment, as well as a few others that you can see on the list, that only occur through industrial processes. The most common of these is carbon dioxide. Now, greenhouse gases aren't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, without them, the Earth would be a pretty cold place. Without greenhouse gases, the Earth's temperature would be about 0 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 18 Celsius. The problem is, we now have too much of these gases in the atmosphere. Most scientists agree that 350 parts per million carbon dioxide is the maximum safe level to avoid possible cataclysmic and irreversible change. And the longer we stay above that, the more dangerous things become. Now, we passed 350 parts per million in 1989. That's before the typical college-age student was even born. So your question for next time is related to this. I want you to go to the website www.co2.earth and look up the current concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Now, we can see an impact on global temperature stemming from these trends. In truth, these trends date back to the Industrial Revolution. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, carbon dioxide concentration had held steady at about 280 parts per million for several thousand years. Our reliance on fossil fuels is only making things worse. Okay, so the Earth is warming. So what? How do we know whether this change is a good or a bad thing? I mean, maybe these changes will be beneficial. Perhaps we'll see increased agricultural production or better navigability in colder regions like northern Canada and Russia. In reality, we see much stronger evidence of some considerable harms occurring. We've been seeing continuously record-breaking summer heat over the last decade. Such shifts in weather patterns are both difficult for many humans to manage, and they're also prompting the migration of various plants and animals. Even in places where species aren't migrating, such temperature shifts are prompting significant ecological disruption. In addition to heat, we can look at major weather events such as hurricanes and blizzards. While it's dangerous to say that any single weather event is due to climate change, we can look at the patterns of these events over time, and those trends indicate a major increase in storm intensity in recent years, as well as shifts in global rainfall patterns, leaving some with droughts and others with flood. Even our national security agencies are preparing for increased risk of regional conflict and global instability due to climate change. For example, when people's access to water disappears, they may be more likely to fight over water resources. And a growth of studies link climate change to increased disease and related health factors across the world. Sea levels are also increasing, which has already caused significant destruction in South Pacific Island nations and other coastal areas around the world. Not only does this mean a loss of their way of life, it means neighboring nations are faced with climate refugees seeking a new home. We're already starting to see similar impacts here in the US in cities like New York, San Francisco, New Orleans, Miami, and Houston. And this is just a snapshot of some of the worst problems. So we have pretty compelling evidence that climate change is happening and humans are the chiefly responsible party, despite what some deniers will try to tell you. In short, climate change is real and anthropogenic. We also have growing evidence as to the significant problems climate change will bring with it, and in many ways is already contributing to. The physical science paints a clear picture on both of these counts. But what we do about it is rooted not just in the physical realm, but also the social realm, and it's bound up in both personal values and social and economic power relations. We might therefore think of climate change as a super wicked problem. Super wicked problems meet all the characteristics of wicked problems with the following additional characteristics. Time is running out. There is no central authority to make anyone take action. And those seeking to solve the problem are also most implicated in its cause. And that is where we will pick up in our next class.